absolute favorites because it models and it shaped me to be the kind of person I am. Always looking for the person who is on the outside, who's curious about spirituality, and just needs someone to approach them and come close and talk to them, to accept them for who they are. And this has deeply shaped who I am as a person. People who are interested in spirituality but feel uncomfortable around religious people. But I know that I preach about that stuff all the time. I'm always preaching about how we need to change in order to grow, as our mission statement says. I'm always talking about outreach and how to survive as a church. And I wasn't going to go there today. I thought, I'm going to take a break from that and just talk about what does effective communication look like. I thought that would be a good topic because that's also in the text. But then I forgot that Julie was coming today, so I immediately switched back to my original plan. Because as you have already heard, Julie and I have that something in common. We basically worked for the same organization. She currently works for Skate Life, and I used to work for Young Life for 9 years back in the late 90s, early aughts. I don't know, maybe you haven't heard of Young Life, so let me tell you about them. Young Life is a missionary organization which began in 1941 in Gainesville, Texas, when Jim Rayburn, a Presbyterian youth pastor, started a weekly outreach club to reach high school students who were not interested in Christianity. It was actually his pastor who said to him, "Listen, Jim, the church kids are fine. We don't need you. Why don't you go across the street to the public high school and hang out with the kids who don't go to church?" So Jim did. And with a unique focus on friendship and accepting people as they were, Jim invited these teens to these gatherings that were filled with skits, fun music, and simple, short messages about Jesus. He called these gatherings Young Life Clubs, and the movement grew. It grew rapidly as it embraced kids where they were, creating these authentic connections and sharing the Christian faith tradition in accessible, welcoming ways. You might say that Jim Rayburn had traded in the pulpit for a living room full of rowdy teenagers. Rayburn quickly realized that faith often does not just happen in straight lines of theology or straight lines of pews, but they happen in circles, in those warm, imperfect circles of friendship, where laughter and singing break down walls and where conversation opens hearts. My favorite Jim Rayburn quote, and you've heard me say this one before, is this: "It's a sin to bore a kid with the gospel." It's a sin to bore a kid with the gospel. In 1993, Young Life started in East Vancouver when James Preddy, whom we may remember from Remembrance Day a year ago, when James Preddy came up to me and said, "Brian, I want you to bring this message of God's love into the high schools of East Vancouver." So with a small group of leaders, I responded, and we were creative and we were passionate, and we formed programs that connected with teens where they were at, on the streets, in youth open custody centers, through work creation programs. We had Young Life clubs as well, where we invited Chinese-speaking kids, indigenous youth, those from challenging family backgrounds. We started these Young Life Club meetings that had fun music, sports, road trips, card games, and again, the simple, hopeful message about Jesus, and it transformed lots of young lives back then. It was like me and my team were planting seeds in unlikely soil, places where others might overlook. Yet when these seeds were watered with love and with fun, they grew in remarkable ways. I'm still connected with lots of those kids now. They're in their 30s and 40s. Around the same time, in 1992, Skate Life started as an offshoot of Young Life when Dean Dahl, friend of mine, we just texted this morning actually, when he and his small group of leaders started a ministry to skateboarders in Kelowna. He was also inspired to bring the gospel into the skate parks. So he gathered teens around their love of skateboarding, and he used this natural connection to share, guess what? The message of Jesus. So what began as this localized gathering, it grew into this vibrant outreach that's now recognized across Canada. And Julie told me yesterday they're starting a club in Mexico. Yeah, that's unreal. Uniting skate culture with faith and with community. North Point Church, where I received a lot of my training to be a pastor in the 2000s, it began in 1995 when Andy Stanley, son of television pastor Charles Stanley, anyone heard of Charles Stanley? No. When Andy cast a vision for a church focused on reaching the unchurched in Atlanta. He started in rental places, and his main thing was North Point can't be just another American church. It has to be a safe place for people to explore Jesus' teachings. Andy and his team were laser focused on removing any barriers that could get in the way of unchurched people checking out church for perhaps the first time. In 1996, they bought some land, and in 98, they had their first building. And their mission was, back then, and still is, to create churches that unchurched people love to attend. They prioritized inspiring people to follow Jesus by creating inviting environments filled with lively music, practical messages, and gathering people into small groups throughout the week for further spiritual growth and to nurture that growth in circles. A unique feature of North Point is that they don't count attendance on Sunday mornings. Or at least they didn't back when I was there. They only count attendance in their weekly small home group Bible studies. I think they call them life groups or community groups, some such thing. Because they are convinced that life change happens in circles, not rows. A line can separate, but a circle includes. In a circle, everyone's face is visible. There are no front rows or back pews in a circle, just shared stories and open hearts. This approach to following Jesus, going where people are rather than waiting for them to come to us, actually isn't new. Jim, Andy, me, or Dean, we did not invent this. It's a pattern that began 2,000 years ago in a small town called Nazareth and has been replicated by countless missionaries down through the centuries. Missionaries like, these are just my favorites, Matteo Ricci, Hudson Taylor, even our own John Wesley come to mind as people who had an outsider-first mindset. Now, as many of you know, Jesus' ministry began around 30 CE, or AD as we used to call it, when Jesus was filled with the Spirit of God, and he was sent on a mission by the one he called Father. The mission was to seek and to save the lost, just like our text says. And Jesus would introduce them to the saving reality that they truly belong. His method was hands-on, relational, rooted in deep connection. In our passage today, his encounter with Zacchaeus illustrates this perfectly. We have Jesus creating a club or a welcoming environment at Zacchaeus' house, signaling that they are accepted, that they belong. And they got criticized, just like Jim did, just like Andy did, just like Dean did. Got criticized from the religious professionals who did not have that same spacious imagination to think that it could be done differently. The gathering space that Jesus created at Zacchaeus' house became a sacred place, not because it was a temple or a synagogue or a church, but because unconditional love was there, and that made it a sacred place. Jesus' mission wasn't about maintaining rituals for ritual's sake, protecting the status quo for the status quo's sake. It was about breaking bread, breaking barriers, and mending human hearts. Maybe at this point you're wondering, sure, Brian, that's really great. It's great that all these people did big things for God in the past, sharing the message of God's love with those who haven't heard it before. But we can't do that. Look at us. We're just this little church, small group of people. Look around, Bride. Do you see any missionaries here? Well, yeah, I see lots of them. Exhibit A, Julia Hood. She's doing exactly what Jesus modeled in his encounter with Zacchaeus. But instead of short tax collectors climbing trees, she's befriending short skateboarders, riding ramps. They grow though. There's some tall ones. Yeah. And guess where she's doing this? Right here in our church building, every Wednesday, with a group of leaders, a small group of leaders, and a very limited budget. Together, Julia and her team are continuing the legacy of Jim Rayburn, Dean Dahl, Andy Stanley, and most importantly, Jesus Christ, every week in our gym. We get to be a part of the greatest calling of all, revealing divine love to those who didn't think that it included them. Julia is here this morning as one of a passionate number of modern missionaries, using the same old tactics that they learned from Jesus 2,000 years ago, changing the world one person, one skateboarder at a time. Now, I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to just point out one thing from the story here, from the Zacchaeus story. I want you to notice what salvation is and what it isn't. It isn't defined as going to heaven or escaping hell. It's defined as recovering a sense of belonging. So I'll say it again for emphasis. Salvation is recovering a sense of belonging. Zacchaeus did not receive his sense of belonging by joining a church or memorizing a creed, but simply by being curious, by showing interest. He even climbed a tree just to get closer to Jesus and his message. Curiosity, it appears, is a first step of faith. And then Zacchaeus met Jesus, and immediately one thing shifted in him without him having to do anything. Something happened in his heart, and it was a shift in regards to his relationship with money. He realized that what he thought would make him happy no longer did. Some of us have experienced that shift. Something that we thought was going to make us happy, and we pursued it, whether it's relationships, money, sex, wealth, investments. Right now, I got friends who are just like pursuing crypto and investing. Good luck. There's nothing wrong inherently with that, but if you're doing it to make yourself happy, like Zacchaeus found out, that will not serve you. You will not get happiness that way. So Zacchaeus realized his habits were no longer serving him, and he literally gave his wealth away. And he found joy and belonging instead. Salvation looks less like following rules and more like discovering that sense of belonging. I don't know where your hearts are at this morning, but if you've never opened yourself up to the possibility of belonging and embracing God's love for you, perhaps the first step is curiosity. It's the question, the spark that asks, could this love that Jesus is talking about, that Brian's going on about, be for me? There are no outsiders amongst the curious. We're all children of God, and we are all invited to call ourselves God people. When curiosity leads to connection, wonderful things happen. And there's so many ways that we live this out as a community of faith already. There's many of us that invite people over for meals. That's a huge part, creating community outside of this building. There's other groups that go on throughout the week that we are already doing, and I believe we can do more. We can do more potlucks, we can do more clubs, we can do more tables at the pub. Whatever it is, whatever you can think of, just to create some circles instead of lines. The Bible says That's where God shows up in the midst. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, the Spirit of Jesus is always there. So today I invite you not to think in lines, but in circles. Lines divide, circles draw us close. Lines push us to judge, like the grumblers in the story. Circles invite us to care. This is the shape of the gospel. An ever-widening circle of love that began in Nazareth, reached Zacchaeus, passed through Texas, Vancouver, and Kelowna, and now includes us. We are on Julia's team, whether you know it or not, because you support this church, and this church lets them use our space. And they are more than happy if we want to get more involved. There's ways to support Julia financially. You can check with Julia first, but you could probably have a little peek at the club that happens on Wednesdays. We'll end it there. There's other ways too. Just talk to Julia. Let's keep drawing the circle wide until every child, every skater, every neighbor knows that they belong. Thus ends the lesson. Thanks be to God.